Hello and welcome to Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started. Our catalyzing statement is a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. Enjoy this module.
Hello and welcome to this module, the transformation sequence. So the transformation sequence is a three-part sequence that we want to hammer home with you over the next 40 minutes or so. So Patrick, why don't you take it away?
This is a big part of business acceleration. Remember, these second 12 modules, 13 through 24, are all about accelerating your business. You got foundational principles that have been laid down in the first 12 months. Now we're into accelerating, which is taking those principles and accelerating your business forward with these new constructs or concepts that we're presenting here. This transformational sequence is something that is very simple, very logical, but if you don't have the structure actually refined in your own mind, you don't follow it, and as a result, people get, I think, sidetracked, distracted, etc. So the basic three parts of the sequence are this. Number one, you have the foundation or what it is that you want to accomplish, whether that be, for example, in the first 12 months, you learned a principle. You want to now implement that principle, etc., and make it a part of your living existence for yourself or your business. So, or it might be more of a narrow scope thing. Maybe it's you want to improve your relationship with your spouse, or you want to do any number of things that it's not a generalized principle, but there's a what here, something specifically that you want to do. So we start out, the first phase is what is it that you want to accomplish here? Whether implementation of a principle, improvement of your relationship, getting in better shape for your body, but it's just what's the objective?
Really, yeah, and I was going to say any objective.
Any objective that you have.
Yeah.
So now that you have the objective, the next step is implementation of that objective, or making it happen, or execution is another term that I think you can interchange with implementation. And then the third phase of this sequence is the accountability. So again, the three steps are the objective, the implementation, and the accountability. And I find that obviously if you're void of any of them, it can't be the first one because you have to have something that you're starting with. But when you don't have the second two in place in a way that we're going to describe right now, the likelihood that you're going to be able to succeed with what your objective is becomes very, very low to non-existent. So let's start out this way. Let's start with an objective. And let's say that the objective is to get into better shape. Now, applied with that, it might be some principles about getting into better shape, about health and well-being. And it has to do with exercise, dietary considerations, caloric burning, and whatever your particular belief systems are about that, or whatever principles guide you in that realm that relate to that objective. You'd want to identify those things. Now you'd say, okay, how am I going to implement that? Well, if you came to a conclusion that you wanted to, that exercise was a necessary part of this, that you needed to exercise to burn more calories, to work your muscles, to do all the things that exercise does, etc., then you'd say, okay, I'm going to now put myself into a ritual and rhythm, like you learned from the last show, the last year rather, a ritual and rhythm of exercise, and you frame that up. That's the implementation part. But what I have found, like most people have, is that there's a third piece of this called accountability. And accountability, when I got into my accountability group a few years ago, was life-changing for me. Because that's the thing that makes it all come to life and gets the results. So, for example, my gym where I work out, and I'm there most mornings, we're there early, and I noticed that in January, the gym is full. I mean, the parking lot's hard to find space, you're waiting online for equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened? People had an objective. Hey, it's the new year, and it's time for me to get back in shape. They had the implementation. I'm going to go to the gym in the morning before work to get myself in shape. What they didn't have was the accountability. Because I can tell you by February 1st, that gym is empty, and the guys and gals that are there in the morning, throughout the entire year, we all kind of look at each other and give a little nod, in January, kind of laughing about, we know this is going to end pretty soon, and by February, the place is pretty much a ghost town. We have the run of the place as far as equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one, kind of simple example, but I want to emphasize how without accountability, the other two things can fail miserably.
To extend on that example, the people that do succeed with the New Year's resolutions do what? They hire a trainer.
Right.
And in fact, a good friend of mine had a New Year's resolution, and I said, why don't you pay the trainer in advance for 6 months? And this person stayed with the program through June and actually lost 87 pounds.
Wow.
So the accountability component in that example would be a trainer as well.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, because I had a trainer for a period of time, still work with a trainer now, workout buddies, etc. I can tell you there are numerous times that I would have ended up not going to the gym if I didn't know that somebody was meeting me there at an appointed time, and in order for me to stay in integrity, I had to show up. So, because it's just the way human nature is, it's the way the world works, and you'll start to see as we discuss this and open this up, it applies to your business in a very profound way. But again, to review, 3 steps. What's the objective? What's the implementation? And then how are you going to create accountability to make sure that this sustains and executes?
I want to add a personal example for me here. My wife and I were going through a period in our marriage where we weren't communicating. And so the objective was to improve our marriage. And oftentimes when people create goals or resolutions, they start there and they end there. They start with, I want to lose weight, I want to improve my marriage, I want to grow my revenue 100%. And that's the end of it. What my wife and I did to honor this 3-phase sequence is that we said, okay, let's sit down and create the objective. We want to improve our marriage. And then we talked about execution. Well, what do we want to do? So we created a few things that we do. Number 1 is we want to have a business meeting in my office every Friday at 3 p.m.
Improving his marriage has to do with having business meetings.
but it was a weekly ritual, and it still is. My wife and I get together. There's no other distractions. There's no cell phones. There's no other meetings going on. It's her and I in a conference room every Friday. We're going to have weekly date nights on Tuesday night. You've heard about this in a prior module, but that was another thing to execute on and implement. We're also going to add, and I got this idea from Patrick, on a daily basis, we're going to have a 30-minute daily connection. So I come home from work, and we just go off somewhere for 30 minutes and connect, or it could be when the kids are in bed. My point is, that's what we had to implement on. And then the third thing was accountability. My wife was my accountability partner. She's the one that holds her ground. We're going to do this every week. The other thing is some simple acts of organization, the simplest things, can make the most complex things occur. What do I mean by that? All we did was we got on our calendars, we set up a calendar entry that recurs for all of those 3 recurring meetings, and it's on her calendar, it's on my calendar, it's on my personal assistant's calendar with reminders. So we just know, and it happens. So in this case, we started with improving our marriage. We put the implementation or execution component in place through conversation, okay, and through using technology, i.e. a calendar. And then the accountability comes because my wife is the chosen one when it comes to accountability. She took on that role. So she, in this example, is my trainer. But this also works inside companies. So often I see companies get their purpose, they get their catalyzing statement, they get their strategy, then it comes to objectives. And what do? They pick 5 objectives, and that's it. They forget all about, we have to figure out how we're going to execute on this, lay it out exactly, load up those calendars with recurring items, and then accountability. Who is going to own this project? And you have to have that accountability. And get one individual to be the accountable partner who gets bonused when that thing happens. And again, we said we're going to accelerate last year's modules. That's what we're doing right now with this. I want you to think, every single thing you're trying to get done in your life, how can I make sure these 3 are in place, and are they clearly defined?
So again, to reiterate, 3 steps: the what, the objective, what is it that you're looking to accomplish, implementation, and accountability. What I want to talk to you about now, related to this, might be the biggest takeaway that you'll have from this entire module. That is this: I read a book years ago called Execution, and implementation execution, I kind of use that interchangeably. And I remember in the, it was either in the beginning of the book, either the forward or it was probably in the first chapter, I read something that was like, wow, did it hit me right between the eyes. And I believe that this is something that affects not only entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs, but also all businesses on all scales. And they talk about with execution what they call the gap. And it's the gap that nobody knows. And what that gap is that nobody knows is the gap between what the vision or the mission, what the agenda is, what the what is of the organization, what they want to get accomplished, what they want to execute on. The gap between that vision and what the team in place to do it is capable of. And that's another place where things fall down. We already talked about how accountability is critical so things don't fall down. The next step is you're the business owner, you're the doctor leading the practice, you're whatever business you might be in, but you're that person that's there. And you say, this is where we are going to take our business this year. You're setting up, if you did your war room, if you've done the other things that we taught you, you set up these lofty, ambitious goals, which is something that we encourage. The question is there a gap between what your team resources are, and those resources are mental ability, physical ability, every ability that people have, what's their capacities? Is there a gap between what you set out as an objective and what the people responsible for that objective are capable of accomplishing? This is something that is really difficult to assess because you don't want to shoot too low, but at the same time, you don't want to go past what the capacity of the team is. So that becomes, I think, a new consideration, the gap, what we might call the execution gap. What's between what you want to execute on and what the team's capable of? And if they are capable, if it's a stretch, but they're capable, great. And accountability will drive that home and make it happen. But if it's beyond the scope of what the team wants to do, it's like me saying, hey, you know what? I fly so much, I think I'll start an airline. I think I want to create a division of my holding company that's going to get into private jet function, whatever. I don't have much expertise there. The people who work with me don't have much expertise there. It would need intensive amounts of capital that we don't have. I can make a long list of why, even though I love that objective, and I'd be passionate about making it happen, and all the reasons about how it could be a part of my vision, aligns with my values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I put it out there, and suddenly we're going to fail miserably. And we're going to fail miserably because there's a big gap between what I said we need to do as a team, as a company, and what the company resources are to make that happen. And that can be financial, that can be relationship, that can be employee resources, and quite frankly, your own personal expertise. There's a lot of things I'm interested in that I don't have an expertise in, but I'm one of these kinds of guys that thinks that I can figure it out, I think I'm smart, and et cetera, but I don't have my 10,000 hours in, like the other guys do that I'd be competing with to make something like that happen. So this is a key component where I think people fall down, fail, get hurt, et cetera. So just lining this up again, what's the objective? That's the first phase. Second phase is implementation, execution, and one of the things I want you to pay attention to in execution is there a gap or not between what you want to do and what the team who's responsible is capable of doing? And then the third thing is going to be the accountability side of this.
And keep in mind that as a successful entrepreneur or a want-to-be entrepreneur or a business person in general, we are yes machines. And to what Patrick's pointing out is somebody introduces you to a new way of conducting your business. Hey, let's create direct marketing on the web. Well, all of a sudden, your existing business that has an existing strategy just got added to it a layer of complexity. And they often tell you in the web world, well, this is really easy to execute on. And now you find yourself completely buried in an operating area that you have no knowledge of. And normally you fail to execute there. There's something that I've been saying for many years, which Patrick alluded to, and that is Where things start is where they typically stay. Where things start is where they typically stay. What does that mean? Well, if you start a new business and you hire some employees and it's not working out so well, maybe their capabilities aren't there, or maybe it just didn't really get off the ground. Oftentimes I'll go back and revisit a chaotic business 5 years later, and guess what? They're still chaotic. And the reason for that is because where things start is where they typically stay. So it's incredibly important that when you start a new initiative, and when you start a new company, and when you start a new personal goal, objective, whatever, make sure you lay out these 3 components at the beginning so it doesn't start out chaotic. I believe the biggest reason that companies and individuals fail to achieve things is because they don't understand what we're talking about here, and they don't have a strategy in place, which was a recent module that you watched. So be really careful about all that. Another thing I wanted to touch on is we talked about in a prior module rhythms, putting rhythms in place to amplify success. Well, this is part of the execution and part of the accountability, because the accountability component depends on these rhythms being in place. But the point is, oftentimes objectives fail to be achieved because people don't think about putting a rhythm in place. Incredibly important. So please be careful. I got involved in an organization about 11 years ago now that we decided to create accountability groups for everybody involved. So that there was about 14 different accountability groups. And at the beginning, when we set up this whole system, I said, each forum, pick an accountable partner to be in charge of the accountability group. Send an email to the entire group and have a rhythmic calendar entry with a phone number on it. Very, very simple things. You realize some incredibly simple things can have incredibly positive results? Well, half of the groups sent the email out, a permanent long-term calendar entry, and half of them didn't. Several years later, guess how many groups were functioning properly? And when I say functioning properly, the people in the group were getting incredible results in their lives and in their marriages and in their businesses and in all aspects of their life. They were the 7 people that did one thing. I'm sorry, they were the 7 groups that did one thing. They sent an email out. The other 7, well, this isn't working for us. We can't find anybody to lead. I don't know when the calls are. One very simple step, oftentimes, is all it takes to have the execution locked down and the accountability locked down. The first part, the what, is clearly the objective or the principle, as we're talking about. So, true to our words here in this program, we want things to be simple for you. We want them to be leverageable, and we want you to increase the probability of success.
I'll say this, the basic nature of the entrepreneur, the person who endeavors to go into a business and grow a business over time, is that they're an optimist, they have vision, they have ideas and ideals basically that they want to move toward, and they believe. And without that, nothing gets started. Everybody else in the world works for those people. The challenge of the entrepreneur is their attention span relative to all the detail that follows that. And that's where so often, and again, speaking from my own personal experience, this is why I understand it so well. I can't tell you how many times I've had ambition to go into things with excitement. I know we can get it done, and we're going to go in this direction. We're going to charge out there. But the execution falls flat because it was what we were seeking to do was beyond the scope. There was a gap there that was not acknowledged, and then the accountability after the fact wasn't built in to even salvage what might have gotten done. So as simple as these things sound, and as Rick just basically presented, and I hope you heard what he was saying, simple things sometimes become the most leverageable things that create success in the long term. So this is about becoming mature in your process and saying that you don't have to have a complicated process to say, wow, I'm a special entrepreneur, a special business person because I've created this incredibly complex process to make things happen. It's the opposite of that. It is, how can I create the simplest model to make the things happen that are going to make my business and or my life work properly. And these 3 steps are extremely simple, but if you make them the filter through which everything you're going to do has to pass through that filter, you will find that you're going to have a much better experience in your life, whether it be on the personal side and or the business side. So again, define the objective, figure out the implementation, make sure there's not a gap, and then have a built-in accountability for that, and you're going to see it's going to work like magic for you.
It's interesting that we're hammering home this point, and we want to make sure you get it. I was telling our cameraman that yesterday I had to give a speech to about 600 people, and they were graduate students of a business program. They wanted to learn more about business from an entrepreneur's perspective. And at the end of the speech, I asked the crowd to come up and give me feedback on the speech, because I want to make sure that they implement it in their lives and that they have accountability associated with it. Well, one gentleman, good-looking guy, came up to me, and I said, well, what did you get out of the speech? He goes, well, you know, to be honest with you, I really wanted you to talk a lot faster, because you have to understand, younger people today, we're used to information coming at us. By the way, part of the speech was about shutting down all that information. I said, well, okay, I talked too slow for you, and I tried to hammer home points, but what did you get out of it? And he said, I don't know, because I was reading my iPad the whole time. So the point is, what I'm trying to get across to you is, this is a very simple concept. We gave you a lot of examples for how you can implement it in your life. Please take it to heart. Please do something with the information. Don't be too distracted with your life to take a very simple formula and apply it right now. I want to add at this point that one of the promises of this module is that we want to give you a personal declaration form. And this is basically a form to show you how to execute on whatever your purpose and catalyzing statement and values are for your life. It's something that I use. It's something that I have accountability partners hold me accountable to. When you go to the implementation guide, there'll be an adjoining document that accompanies that shows you the personal declaration form. If you're in an accountability group, I would encourage you to fill that out individually and share it with your accountability group. If you're not in an accountability group, find a partner to go over that personal declaration form with you. Nothing has held me accountable to the person I want to be more than this personal declaration form. It's you declaring to the world, these are my values that I want you to hold me accountable to. These are my objectives. This is the person I want to be. This is the marriage I want to have. These are the vows that I'm taking with myself. These are my favorite quotes. These are my most important objectives. It's all there. And many people have taken that form and they've actually made it appropriate for their business. What is the business's catalyzing statement and purpose and values and objectives? So when you look at the form, you could adapt it any way you want. We call it a personal declaration form because it's about you. It clearly has some business components in it. But I want to make sure that this form is viewed upon, from your perspective, as the execution component of personal transformation. So I hope this is clear. You still need the accountability. You need to show it to people, make that declaration, and have them hold you accountable to being a great person, if that's what you want to be. Some people may say, I don't want to be a great person. I just want to be an average person.
So I think you have this 3-step process by now, at least abstractly. You've got some examples. Let's go into the application section of the module.
Welcome to the applications portion of this video for the transformation sequence. One of the things I like about this module, Patrick, is it honors one of our values, which is keep things simple. But oftentimes the simplest things are the hardest to have success at. How do you lose weight? Very simple. You eat less and you exercise more. Well, then why the hell are 50% of the population in America overweight? Explain that to me. The reason is they're missing this very simple transformation sequence. The first thing I want to point you to in the application section is print out that personal declaration form, look at the instructions to fill it out, and make sure you find the time to start there, complete that, and show it to your accountable partner, whether it's your spouse or your accountability group or a group that you formed in your company. You absolutely positively have to have somebody outside of you, just like when Patrick used the example of having his trainer in his gym, has to be outside of you to hold you accountable, or to hold your business accountable, or to hold anything accountable for getting done. If that accountability partner is not present, I can assure you of one thing: whatever the objective is, it will not get done. So one of the things Patrick and I want to do in this section is have you go back and revisit your objectives. How me and Patrick do it is we have 10 annual business objectives and 10 annual personal objectives. And then, as you recall from a prior module, we have 5 quarterly business objectives and 5 personal business objectives. Make damn sure that all of those objectives have a clearly defined outcome, a clear way to execute on that outcome, and somebody outside of you holding you accountable to making sure that happens, whether it's your accountability group or your spouse or someone in your business, if it's a business objective. All of those have to be in place. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure.
So let's take a practical application here, maybe one from personal, one from business. So you have these objectives. Some are personal, some are business. Let's start with the personal. If you're married or you have a significant other, you come in, you bring in the significant other. Here's the objectives of what we're looking to do. So the objectives are number one, decided upon. So that's step one, pretty basic. And I'm pretty sure you have this already done, at least that part of it. Second step is now implementation. How are we going to make this happen? Understand, this is going to require behavioral change. If you're going to bring something new into your existence, into your experience, behavioral change is going to have to occur. So in the case of the personal side, it's going to be behavioral change between you and your significant other. But the question must be asked, and we're going to do this again on the business side, the question must be asked, is there a gap between what we're capable of doing and what we're setting out to do? It's got to be, the question's got to be posed. And if there is a gap, then you have to spend whatever time is necessary either to close that gap or to pick a new objective. So, for example, my wife and I got into certain rhythms with our lives, much of which, and we have kids, so much of which is required us to be together in a situation where we can't watch our kids. So we'd set the agenda and we'd look and say, okay, here's the objective we want to accomplish, and here's what you and I are going to do together, and it's something that's independent of our ability to watch the kids. But when we look and say, is there a gap here? Oh my goodness, we're just recognizing that if we are going to commit to doing that, going away for Lifebook weekends, for an example, once a quarter, having our date nights every week, having our daily half-hour meeting, etc. We look at those things and we see if there's a gap there. So, for example, if some of the stuff is out of the house and there's a gap, we need kid coverage, we have to recognize we can't even start that initiative until we solve that problem, which means we have to figure out kid care in a different way than we have it figured out right now. And then, of course, there's the accountability side that would follow that. Now let's look at your business side. My recommendation is this. Business objectives are led by the business leader, of course, but everybody must be brought in that are part of that team of that business that needs to buy in. So the objectives are all agreed upon between the parties. And again, I think pretty much if you're doing this program, you do that. That's something that I think every semi-solid business owner, business person would do. Now, secondly, the thing that probably isn't being done, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm going to bring it to your attention, is here's the objective, now there's the team. The business owner says, I know we can do this, and wants to pump the team up to go make it happen, and they don't want to disappoint the leader. The leader's got to ask the question again. Here is our objective. For example, I'll just tell you from the businesses that I kind of know, one of which would be, let's say, a doctor's practice, a chiropractor's practice, a dentist's practice, what have you. You might say, okay, our objective is now to grow, to increase our new patients that come in per month by 50% more than what they were in the prior 12 months, not just for 1 month, but on an ongoing basis. Great. That's exciting. We're going to help more people. We're going to serve more people in the community. We're going to make lives better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can give the rah-rah speech. We can motivate the troops. We can get excited about it. But now you have to ask the question to the group. Is there a gap between increasing our new patients by 50% and what we are capable of doing as a group right now? Because there's a couple things here. They might say, we can get that done, but we're going to lose this over here. They might say, we can get this done, but we're going to need this kind of support over there. It's not just we can get this done. It's, is there a gap between the vision of what's to get done and what the resources are to make that thing happen? And then, of course, the last piece is the accountability. What accountability will be built in? Who is the ultimate accountability person that's going to make sure that people are doing what needs to happen in order for the objective to be made? So this is not really new stuff, but it's sequenced in a way, in an understanding, and I look at it, if I can, I'm Italian so I can talk with my hands. I look at it kind of this way, is that you have the objective or the principles on the bottom here. That's the foundation. What takes it up here now is implementation, the execution, but then what gets it to soar and move completely is going to be the accountability.
Yeah, I like the example you use, because oftentimes in business we have a meeting, and I've been in a lot of board meetings like this, and the CEO says, we're going to double revenue over the next 12 months, and then says to the board, I'll see you next year at our next annual meeting. Well, wait a minute. We forgot about how are you going to double revenue, and are you capable of doubling revenue, and who's going to hold it accountable? So we don't want to belabor it anymore. You got the message of this video, hopefully loud and clear. Please print those implementation guides, go over them with your accountability partner or partners or executive team or spouse, and make sure that you have the 3 legs of the stool in place firmly before you set out to fulfill on an objective. Because if you don't, I promise you that you will fail. So I want to end this on a positive note and say that we are very happy to have you this far into the system. We hope that your life and your business have improved greatly, and we look forward to seeing you next month in finishing school. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching this module of Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started.